Pete Calandra here. This is the fourth video in a series on scoring short films. In earlier videos, I talked about different concepts and aspects of scoring short films, so I won't repeat them here. I'll link in the description box below for the playlist containing those previous videos. In today's film, I'll be talking about developing ideas, changing keys, orchestration, a bit on harmony, and also an introduction to the use of musical mnemonics, specifically their usage in sports music. Today's video is a 5-minute film I scored 2 years ago on the history of football at Yankee Stadium. As this was my work copy, the voiceover was done by one of the filmmakers. Also, you'll see some watermarking and other items on some of the still shots and film clips. The final voiceover was done by a professional voice talent, and all the markings were taken off the images for the final product. As this is typical of what you will get to work on, I thought it best to leave those intact. I'll start the lesson off with the complete film, dialogue and sound design, and at the end, I'll play the session with just the music and film with no voice or sound design. If you like this video, give a thumbs up. For more content, please subscribe, and to be notified, ring that bell. Please leave any comment or questions below. Thanks for watching, and let's get started.
It is the cathedral of American sports. No other walls have seen as much history, or been so defined by the ideals of fair play, the power of redemption, and the value of humility.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
No other venue has seen as many mythic moments or built as many dynasties.
Hayes waits. The Yankees are champions of baseball.
This is Yankee Stadium.
Please welcome the President of the United States.
A place where legendary moments resonate from all corners of sports and society. Joe Louis, Muhammad Ali, His Holiness, Nelson Mandela,
I am a Yankee.
and the most celebrated heroes the gridiron has ever seen. Yankee Stadium has provided the stage for some of the most memorable college and professional football games in history. The names and events still echo throughout its cavernous hallways. In the 1920s and 30s, Army and Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium was an unmatched football tradition. In 1928, the two rivals played to a scoreless tie at halftime. It was then that Knute Rockne urged his team to win one for the Gipper. Those words have been cemented into college football lore ever since. The dramatic rivalry continued. In 1946, fans poured into the stadium to witness second-ranked Notre Dame take on top-ranked Army.
It's the football battle of the century, and 74,000 fans spin the turnstiles to jam every seat in Yankee Stadium.
The crowd was rewarded with the sight of a record 4 Heisman Trophy winners and countless thrills. In the end, the two teams played to a scoreless tie.
It's all over. Army's winning streak is ended, so is Notre Dame's. But 74,000 fans saw the football battle of the century.
12 years later, Yankee Stadium hosted the Giants and the Colts in the first NFL playoff game to go into overtime. It was, in the eyes of the 64,000 fans on hand, the greatest game ever played.
Only 7 seconds remaining. Spitfire boots a field goal from the 20, and the game is tied up as time runs out. For the first time in National League history, a game goes into sudden death overtime.
As though lifted from a fairy tale, the game came down to the 1-yard line, and the ball in the hands of Johnny Unitas.
Unitas takes. He gives to Amici, and the ball game is over. And the Baltimore Colts are the professional football champions of the world.
5 years later, on Thanksgiving Day, 1963, Yankee Stadium proved once again the healing power of sports. Less than a week after the assassination of President Kennedy, Notre Dame took on Syracuse in a classic grudge match. The country welcomed the diversion.
New York's famous subway alumni prove they have long memories. They turn out nearly 57,000 strong to Yankee Stadium to watch their beloved Irish take on the Orange Men of Syracuse.
Despite a valiant effort, Notre Dame's Fighting Irish came up short.
With green jerseys all around him, King throws in the direction of Mike Koski. Mike has it and streaks for the end zone. Koski is in for the score, and Syracuse has finally managed to wrest the lead from the Fighting Irish.
Time and again, Yankee Stadium has staged iconic gridiron showdowns, and the thrills are still coming. In 2010, the Irish returned to the Bronx for the first time in 41 years, christening the new Yankee Stadium with its inaugural college football game and the dawn of a new era. A new age of spirited competition, highlighted by the NCAA's Pinstripe Bowl.
You want to talk about culture? Look around! This is culture!
Through it all, one thing remains the same. The legendary playing field, the mythic pillars, the hallowed hallways, Yankee Stadium. Iconic then, iconic now, iconic always.
Let's start off from the top. I've got this session set up using my usual technique. All the instrumental sections are color-coded with VCA masters used for soloing and overall level control, and the side benefit is that they separate out each different section. For our solo winds, which are just basically piccolo, solo flute, oboe, and clarinet, I'm using the Spitfire symphonic winds. Albion 1 for high winds section and low winds section, and additionally, I'm using Albion 3 Iceni for the low winds. Moving along to the brass, I'm using Cinesample Ensemble Sustains just to add some weight to the track at measure 100, which I'll show you when we get there. And I'm using Orchestral Tools brass for the individual sections. I like Spitfire brass, but I wanted a little bit more control over the individual instruments, and I felt that the clarity of the way these instruments were recorded fit in better with this track. I've got a contact instrument that is a multi with trumpets. I've got another one for horns. And then moving down, I have another multi for my trombones. And then one instrument, contact instrument, that is for my tuba. I'm using also Albion 1 for high brass, mid brass, and low brass. And then Iceni, I've got two different brass, short and sustained. And I'll show you those when we get to those in the piece. For orchestral drums, at this point, I had just purchased the Easy Drummers Action Orchestral program, and I kind of liked it. So what I did with this was, if I go to the mixer, I routed out some of the individual instruments to their own aux tracks so that I would have control over the volume and timbre with EQ. And if I wanted to add extra reverb, I'd have more control over those if they came in separate outputs. Then I'm using Shimmer, Shake, and Strike from In-Session Audio for the shaker grooves in a few sections. And this is a preset pattern right here that I've done a little tweaking to make it fit. And the rest of the drums here and the gongs and the cymbals are from the Spitfire Joby Burgess. And then the triangle is from Cinesample's percussion, because I like the sound of that. And then below that, all of our pitched percussion, the Glock, the tubular bell, the xylophone, the marimba, and the harp are from Spitfire, the Joby Burgess, and then their regular harp. The piano is Ivory's German D that I've tweaked a little bit, and it's a very dry sounding instrument, which makes it nice to add reverb to. And then the Rhodes is from the Scarby EP.4, which is really my favorite sampled Rhodes. It's really fantastic. The strings are mostly from Spitfire, with different articulations from chamber ensembles and sections, symphonic ensembles, and Iceni shorts. I'm also using a solo cello from Cinesamples that I liked, as it has a great singing quality. And then there are some orchestral tools, arcs for added weight to the high spiccatos and low pizzicatos right here. There is a synth patch in a couple of sections, and that's being handled by the very underrated Air Hybrid. This is a really good synth, and sometimes you can find this synth on special on some websites for $2, $5. It's really amazing. I often tell my students when I see that they should add this to their setup. It's well worth it. Below that, I've got sends for 2 halls, one from Fab Filter and one from Lexicon. I'm also using the little plate from Sound Toys for plate, and the Echo Boy, also from Sound Toys. This is my Music Master, and here I've got Pool Tech from UA, I've got this Brainworks BX Saturator and then the LL3. Next up, after our palette of sounds are set up, is to load in the film and do the session setup for frame rate, SMPTE session start, and the music starting point. I've gone over this in earlier videos. Once this is done, I take my spotting notes and mark up the session to give us our form. In this short form, there are 9 markers, 1 for each section of the film. With the color coding, they are easy to see, and taking a look at how they sit over the entire timeline, you can get a sense of the linear proportion each little chapter of this film takes up. I like to have different sized sections, especially in the string orchestra, as this gives me flexibility to compose from intimate to epic with the right sized group, which helps deliver the emotional content of your music and also adds timbral dynamics that can keep your music from sounding too programmed. Going from a chamber-sized group with a solo cello in one section to a full-sized symphonic group in the next that can also be layered with maybe an epic-sounding ensemble is a great way to help the music evolve over time and tell the story of the film. Some of the things I wanted to accomplish in various sections of the score were to convey a sense of wonder, because Yankee Stadium is a place where many amazing things have happened, especially in the old Yankee Stadium. I wanted to have a sense of drama unfolding in the music, as there were many incredibly dramatic moments in Yankee Stadium, even with football and not baseball. There were also sections that needed to be reflective and other sections that needed to be inspirational. And I wanted there to be some easily recognizable elements that tied the different sections together. Please bear with the rough Pro Tools notation. It's good enough to explain what's going on, even if it's not 100% accurate in terms of proper engraving rules. The opening starts off in F major with an energetic, positive piano figure in 16th notes. Right away in the second measure, I introduce an ascending line in the solo horn, followed by ascending figures in the cello and then the oboe. Let's take a listen. One way to get a sense of something unfolding over time is through orchestration. And you notice how in every measure, I've got a new melodic figure coming in. And they're all some sort of ascending line. The ascending line idea is developed throughout the score and helps to tie it together. One more time. And again, right here, this whole section here with the first violins, second violins, and violas is again an ascending line, right? So over the entire first 8 measures, I have 3 different instruments or instrumental groups all playing an ascending figure. And this is central throughout the entire piece. Let's move on to the next section. Okay, let's take a look at this at measure 10. These notes over here are just key switches, so don't pay attention to them. So we've moved to D major. So you notice that this is a variation on that opening piano figure. We're in the key of D major now. And here we've got this, what seems to be an ascending chord progression, right? And an ascending line here in the French horn. So let's just take a look at the trombones and not the strings. And let's just solo those out. Now, if we look at this, so it's not there's a little bit more going on there. Each one of those little dyads contains an inner line. If we look at the bottom in the trombone, and that goes along nicely with the bass line. And it just adds a little interest. So in other words, you take something that's very standard and then you play around with it a little bit so you come up with something just a little bit more interesting. Paying attention to little details like that is the difference between something sounding boring and something sounding a little bit interesting, even if it is a figure like this that you've heard before. And then, what would a sports theme be without a mnemonic? What is a mnemonic? A mnemonic, also known as a memory aid, is a device such as a pattern of letters, ideas, or associations that assists in remembering something. In short, it's something that aids or is designed to aid the memory. The world of sports themes is full of mnemonics that are easily recognizable and brand the event. Think of the most well-known. The majestic fanfare of Bugler's Dreams by Leo Arnaud, used since 1968 for the Olympics broadcasts. The four-note descending theme to Monday Night Football by Bob Israel of Score Productions. The energetic theme for the NBA on NBC, written in the 1990s by John Tesh. And also the iconic Batman on Steroids, NFL on Fox theme, written by Scott Schreer, Phil Garrod, and Reed Hayes of NJJ Music in New York City. Each of these themes contain one common trait. They all create a memorable, short melodic phrase that brands the event and can be used by the networks to promote the programs. Mnemonics are not limited to sports programming. Think of the John Williams theme for Indiana Jones, Star Wars, the Star Trek theme written by Alexander Courage in the 1960s, the three-note NBC Peacock motive. All of these things brand any franchise and make it instantly recognizable to the viewer. As someone who has written over 40 theme songs for network sports programming, I use them all the time. My most successful composition has been the FIFA World Cup theme for Fox Sports, which has been heard by hundreds of millions of people over the past 5 years. There is a link for a playlist in the description box below with some of my sports themes if you wish to hear how I use this compositional technique. So after the announcer says, "This is Yankee Stadium," we move into a new section where I've added a rhythm in 12/8 with fourth chords played in the horns. So let's take a listen to that. All right, so now let's also look at the harmonic scheme. Started off in F major, went to D major, and now we're in D minor. And then in the middle of this section, we go back up to F, but F minor. So what do we have here? So we have a fourth chords. If we look at this, and then the fourth horn is doubling the melody an octave lower. And notice we jump up to F minor, and I've changed the orchestration. So we're in a different subsection of this next section. And when I do that, I change the orchestration. So instead of the horns merely playing these fourth chords, I leave that to the strings, and the horns play this ascending figure again. Ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-bum. And you can hear a really cool counterpoint going on with those pizzicato strings there, starting at measure 21. At measure 27, there is a new chorale section in G major, which is a step higher than F minor, keeping with the ascending idea, however I can make it come about. I've voiced the chords in tenths with the brass an octave lower. So these are muted strings, and the brass is an octave lower than that. And let me see, those are in the Iceni lower brass. That would be here. All right, this is bass clef here. So let's take a listen. Again, more ascending stuff here. Let's take a listen to the Iceni solo because I think it's a beautiful sound. I don't think this D is being played. I should have been a little more careful with that. Yeah, this D is out of the range. At measure 31, we're now moving to the key of D minor. But I'm doing a little something here. Let me just show you the harp, the piano, and the marimba, and the Rhodes. Let's show you these four instruments here. So I'm in D minor, and D minor has an F in it. And I do have an F natural, but I'm trying to avoid it as much as possible. So this section, it sounds more like it's based on a suspended chord than a D minor chord. Another thing I'd like to look at over here on the fourth beat of this measure, right here, is this cluster chord. Right, lots of suspended chords, two chords, all in through here. And then at this measure right here, we're moving it up to E flat minor. And then those must be the high winds section, I believe. Yep. And another one of my favorite things to do is to phrase things into the downbeat, even though this goes a little further than the downbeat. Again, coming up, now we're going to change keys again. And let's look at the horn ensemble there. And we've got another ascending figure here, which is very similar to some of the earlier ideas I've presented in this piece. At 44, again, we're moving up a half step back to the original key, F major. And this is a variation on the figure that the strings had back at measure 10. And during this section, the trumpet plays a figure that's a variation of the horn line that we just heard in the E minor section. Let's take a listen. Again, these variations are all taken from the opening few measures, these ascending lines. They're all variations on those. So if that E minor horn part comes in, sounds like a new melody, well, I sort of gave you a hint of that at the beginning. And if this is a variation on the horn line, it actually really started back at the very first 4 measures or 5 measures or so. In the next bit at measure 56, we change key from F major to D major, which is the same harmonic plan as the opening 20 measures or so, with this time the melodic line being in the high winds. Let's take a listen. These are low strings here, chamber spiccato, and then these are low winds here, just sort of giving you a little bit more weight. At measure 60, we're back up to F major, this time with the melody in the upper brass, and I've layered in some percussion to give it some more emphasis, some more drive, some more gravitas, so to speak. And just to make a variation, right? I'm changing to a new key. It's a new section, change the orchestration. Let's start a little bit before measure 60. At measure 64, we're now going down to E minor from F major, and we've got a fanfare horn line like in the previous section, and this time I've added some dramatic accents and ascending scale lines. Notice the way that I voiced these strings here. They're very similar to the D minor section in the marimba. So I'm sort of taking material, reworking it, reorchestrating it, adding other material to it. At measure 69, we've changed keys again, and we're now in G minor, and there's some somber music here to reflect the storyline concerning the death of President Kennedy. One thing to note here, I keep the G chord open and avoid the B flat minor third, as I don't want it to be morbid, just reflective. And that's a good point to bring up right here, learning how to shade the emotional moods of the piece so that it fits in with the plot. At measure 73, the earlier D minor section returns reorchestrated, with each repeat building up to measure 88 and the return of the earlier D major section with the string ostinato. Let's take a listen. The big thing for me to get to here is that I'm making my way back up to F major because we're getting towards the end of this. And that's the original key of the piece. So let's take a listen. We've got this little transitional brass section which gives you a hint of the mnemonic. One thing I want to go over here is the drum programming or the percussion programming. So let's solo this. And I've added the shaker pattern. Okay, so I've got this in alto clef, I believe. So these notes don't really correspond to anything but the sounds on the program. Right there, you got your kick drum accenting into the 1. Again, leading into the downbeat. This is the first time that I've had a full driving beat like this in this piece, and it's because of what's going on in the screen. There's all this college football that's returned to the new Yankee Stadium. It's exciting. There's all these long passes for touchdowns, long runs for touchdowns, all this stuff. And the music just needs to be driving there, you know, and just move along. And I've brought in this earlier material, and I want to add a little bit of rhythmic vitality to it, even though it is very energetic. And I've got this groove that I put on the bottom of it that really, I think, helps, for lack of a better term. At this point in the film, it switches from all this football that's going on inside of Yankee Stadium to this view of Manhattan at sunrise, and then back into the empty stadium. And I wanted this to be uplifting but yet majestic and fanfare-like, so I've gone with that Cinesamples brass ensemble patch with these ascending chords here. Ending with our mnemonic and a big old button. Let's take a quick look at the brass ensemble there. So at this section, if you take a look, you notice that I've got 4th chords in F minor. And then the next bit up after that is the mnemonic and the big button. You have heard the sound of 4ths earlier in this bit, and that's how you start to develop through lines in your scores. You prepare somebody for what's going to come up later by introducing an element and then developing it and changing it. Not so far that it's not recognizable, but enough so that you've got variation and it's not repetitive over and over again. See, there's some of the techniques that I use. And then we've got this mnemonic here. These are key switches up here. Right? It's 2 suspended chords. A C suspended chord, and then another suspended chord that's an inversion starting on the B flat. Right? So this one here is actually first inversion of an F suspended chord. So I'm really just breaking that up. That brings us to the end of this tutorial. I hope you found this helpful. Leave any comments or questions below. You'd really help the channel out with a thumbs up and a subscription. I'll leave you by playing the score and film again with no voiceover and no sound design. I've been Pete Calandra. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.